Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on Sunday, July 6, 2014 at 14:10 in the afternoon, Eastern Daylight Time. Now, as Psalm 39 says, I held my tongue and spake nothing. I kept silence, yea, even from good words. But it was pain and grief to me. My heart was hot within me. And while I was thus musing, the fire kindled, and at the last I spake with my tongue. Well, the psalmist is talking about trying to figure out how long he's going to live and various vicissitudes of life. However, I'm talking about perhaps some more earthly, contingent, temporal matters. But first, I went to church. It's Sunday, and even though I blew it off last Sunday because of that parish picnic, I did go this morning to the 8 o'clock service, and I stopped over at Walmart ahead of time and got the monthly contribution to the People in Need program. I had a couple of options this month. It's either chicken noodle soup or uh, like helper meals, these hamburger helper, tuna helper things, and cans of tuna, that sort of thing. I opted for the tuna helper meals and cans of tuna. I priced the chicken noodle soup. Well, the condensed versions are 75 cents a can, which Campbell's has been pushing the price on that up and down over the last few months. They've had it as high as 85, 90 cents a can. And then they're chunky, non-dilute up soups. They've been pushing the price on that between $1.50 and almost $1.98 a can. They had dropped them back to $1.50 here about 3 weeks ago, but I noticed that they're back up to, they were $1.94 today, so I didn't buy those. So that's why I went for the tuna and the tuna helper things. So these guys are going to be getting a lot of salt. That's that's all I can say. I mean, they ought to package a Lasix or something with some of these products. Now the tuna fish doesn't have much salt in it at all, but it's the packaged noodly mixy stuff that you make a casserole with that which is it tastes good. I mean, it really tastes good. Anybody who's been at a picnic or potluck supper knows that. So today, the gospel was a segment of Matthew 11, and it's got about 3 different segments in it. The initial opening thing was this is one that always puzzled me for a long, long time. It still might puzzle me, but I've read something about it, and so what I've read makes kind of sense. So I've kind of just put that one on the back burner of things to think about. And it says, Jesus is talking to folks, and he says, "But whereunto shall I liken this generation?" And here's where it gets kind of interesting. "It is like children sitting in the markets and calling unto their fellows and saying, We have piped unto you, and ye have not danced. We have mourned unto you, and ye have not lamented." Well, according to a couple of these cultural anthropologists I've read, this refers to a custom of Palestinian, Judean, children at that time. Now, I don't know how they figured this out, but that's what they're saying. They say. There's always a they saying something in there. And the theory is, the hypothesis is that since many celebrations hired paid performers to either rejoice or paid mourners to wail and carry on, if they didn't have enough family members to do the wailing and carrying on, and enough guests, I guess, coming in from out of town to stay in the very expensive hotel rooms and go to the very expensive party. I guess if they didn't do that, they just went out and they hired some, to make up like, oh look, we're important enough to have a big party. And apparently, the kids would play this game among themselves that reflected some of the, how shall we say, intra-household conflicts between their parents about some of these issues. You can't even get somebody to come to your own daughter's wedding. Well, honey, I'm hiring some stuff. That's not real. I mean, that kind of stuff. And then the same thing. Mourners is, your mother was so hated that nobody's even going to come to her funeral. You can sort of imagine some of this stuff going on here today without necessarily the hired hands being involved. So that was an interesting explanation of that. But basically, I think Jesus' point was, what should I liken this generation? Well, it's a generation of people that just don't take anything seriously. They aren't really considering what's about to happen to them and where they've been and where they're going. And then he offers a bit more of a concrete, more specific example. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he hath a devil. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they said, behold, a man gluttonous and a wine-bibber, a friend of publicans and sinners. Okay, I'll stop there for a moment. Obviously, that's an analogy to the kind of trivialized thinking that goes on in the child's play example just immediately preceding. But then the final clause in this verse is, but wisdom is justified of her children. But wisdom is justified of his children. Now we got several significant words here. You have wisdom, which is often taken as a substitute word for the Word or for Christ himself. Justified, meaning imputed righteousness, righteousness being imputed or declared by a judge or a tribunal, and of her children, meaning people that accept the incarnate Word and what he has to say and offer. Because, we're supposed to come to Christ as if we are a child, without any preconceptions, without any baggage. And so, the righteousness of Christ, the justification, the wisdom, justifies, is justified by the fact that people will come to him as little children. Now that's almost like a throwaway clause in that. And there are other parts of the various Gospels that talk about, coming to Christ as a child. But then then they skipped over all the woes to the various towns. And then we get down to Jesus saying that, oh Father, thank you for hiding all this stuff from the people who really ought to know better, and declaring it to simpler people. It says, no man knoweth the Son but the Father, neither knoweth any man the Father save the Son, and he to whomsoever the Son will reveal him. And of course, that's a very key clause. And he to whomsoever the Son will reveal him. Meaning, you can't know anything about God unless you look at Jesus. You can't become at all like God in your own life unless you imitate Christ. I mean, that's how we know God. We can think about God, we can contemplate God, but in terms of any knowledge of God, we can only know God through Jesus Christ. And then the great line, come unto me, all ye that labor and are I'm sorry. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Well, I think that speaks for itself. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Wonderful. But now, instead of getting sort of an explication of the gospel, I'm sorry. Well, as I said, Psalm 39, my heart kindled within me, and suddenly then I had to speak. And, well, no, I'm not sorry. I'm trying to speak the truth here in peace and love. That's what we try to do here on the Joe Kersey channel, speak the truth in peace and love. The sermon today began with a poem from the New Yorker about country music. Well, I like country music, some of it. Some of that can be quite fun, pickup trucks and divorces and dogs and going fishing and, fighting in bars, friends betraying each other. It's fun. Getting drunk, having a bad hangover, having to go to work. That's country music. And apparently this guy had written a poem in the New Yorker. I'm surprised there's anybody in the Midwest even still takes that magazine. I bet they're kind of surprised too, actually. And he said that this poem was basically about, and here comes one of my favorite buzzwords, a journey. Having a journey. But no, I did not clutch the top of my head and scream wildly and dance around in church. I sat there like a good Episcopalian, as if I'd been poleaxed and was watching the donkey show from Tijuana because the bishop had sanctioned it. There's gnats flying around. Pay no attention to my flapping hand. So I listened to a fair amount of Journey stuff today. Yeah, and eventually he does wind around to the various gospel elements and says something relatively reasonable about some of them. I was coming back to the word journey. Well, so then at the Eucharist, we did Eucharistic Prayer C, the Star Wars prayer, or as I call it, the California prayer, or the Jeopardy theme song prayer. And then to top it off, he did the contemporary version. Did you notice that word? The contemporary version of the Lord's Prayer. No, the one out of the 1662 prayer book isn't good enough. We now have to do a contemporary version of the Lord's Prayer. Fortunately, he doesn't do that every week. I think he's got enough grief about that. And he doesn't do that daggone prayer C very often either, which is fine. It was very interesting. This particular form of the Eucharistic prayer has to have, there's a lot of times for the congregation to respond. There's like 8 or 9 times. Excuse me. And let's just say that among the 8 o'clock crowd, and we were fairly numerous today. We were about almost 30, which is big for 8 o'clock. The responses were very weak and, generally absent among some of the, how shall we say, more theologically conservative types. Well, and I think you might have an idea who was one of those, or is one of those. Still, bread and wine were distributed. Everything went fine. So I went home, and on the way up, I had noticed that the side door in the garage there on the corner property was standing open. So I stopped on the way back to investigate, and indeed it was standing open. Somebody could have been in there. Because I had a big cinder block up against the door on the inside, so somebody had to have shoved that thing, in. And then I went over to see if they'd tried to get into the corner house proper, and there's a big poison ivy vine about the size of my thumb, thickness of my thumbs, growing up right by the doorknob there where they'd get in on the back porch. But they had tried to open the storm door in front of the back door to the basement. They hadn't gained access. Wouldn't done them any good. There's nothing in that house left anyway. After it got robbed here about 1.5 years ago. Saved themselves a lot of trouble. And a case of poison ivy, too, I guess. So there you are. So then I came home, and Joe, you'll never learn. Oh, look at all the insects flying around my head. I feel like Fly Face sometimes. Remember that old Dick Tracy cartoon? And there's a character called Fly Face. And he always had flies. Well, flies flying around his face. Hence Fly Face. I bet you there aren't but about 2 people in the United States remember that right now. And well, you're reading the funny papers when you're 4 or 5. There it is. Fly Face. That sticks with you. But I came home, and I was anticipating. I was traveling hopefully. And I guess this journey didn't quite work out. So, once again, all I can say is the head is learning. The head is learning, but the heart is sure lagging really, really far behind. So on that note, said he's scratching his ear, I'm going to say bye-bye, YouTubers. Alrighty, bye-bye.